titled Not Your Traditional Commercial Crew and Cargo, focuses on the near future of this industry, the flurry of activities in NASA's commercial crew and cargo programs over the last few months have been good for the industry. Ideas are turning into vehicles, and market projections coming closer to reality. But in the excitement of the day-to-day progress, it can be hard to step back and take a look at where we're going. This panel will provide an update on current activity, but also look 3 to 5 years down the road to where we expect to be. The moderator of this panel is Dr. Alexander Saltman, who currently serves as the Executive Director of Commercial Spaceflight Federation, and he will introduce our distinguished panelists. Please welcome Dr. Saltman.
Thanks, Curtis. This is going to be an interesting one. I think we've a lot of us have seen panels before. We talk about what's happening, but we really also want to talk about what's happening next. So I'm really looking forward to it. On my left here, I have Adam Harris from SpaceX. He's a VP of Government Sales, and before he joined SpaceX, worked for that almost popular of institutions, the U.S. Congress, in the House Intelligence Oversight Panel on the Appropriations Committee. Next, I have Dennis Stone. He's Manager of Program Integration, Commercial Crew and Cargo Program. He's been, I think, for many years now, a key player in NASA's move towards commercial efforts, so we're very happy to have him here. Then we have Mark Sirangelo, Chairman of Sierra Nevada Space Systems, and with their Dream Chaser vehicle. He's been in this business for a long time, and has a really exciting story to tell about Dream Chaser and where it's going. And then we have Jeff Patton from ULA, who's the manager of the commercial crew and cargo programs there. And he's been spending, I think, a lot of his time for the last few years working on human rating the ULA vehicles and how that's going to happen. So I think he'll have interesting things to say. So I want to start off with NASA. So if Dennis can go.
I have slides, so can I use the...
Yeah, go for it.
Good morning, and thanks for coming to the conference. It's great to be here. I probably should have been the last speaker, but because I'm going to talk about what follows after COTS, because I think you'll hear today in Adam's presentation the great success, of course, of the SpaceX demonstration to the ISS. And we have one more, Orbital Sciences. They're planning to launch the Antares rocket and the Cygnus cargo carrier, following in SpaceX's footsteps. But when you step back and just look at the COTS program, so you see an $800 million investment by NASA, and the result, with a little knock on wood for orbital's sake, 2 new launchers, 2 new cargo carriers that can rendezvous and berth with the ISS. Not a bad deal, when we look at the economy of what we got as taxpayers for the investment that we made. And furthermore, these new launchers and the new cargo carriers are company-owned, company-operated, and thereby available not only to the government, but to other customers as well. So that's what we got for our $800 million. We also got a validation of a fairly new model, the model of the Funded Space Act Agreement. We call it now the COTS model. And so let me try to explain maybe how we look at that model in retrospect now that we've seemed to have a success with it. We found a sweet spot where NASA had a mission need, namely the station needed cargo. And the possibility of an intersection between that and non-NASA markets. Not proven, not demonstrated, certainly not quantified, but just a possibility. Then we used the Funded Space Act agreements to facilitate the development and the demonstration of the capabilities. There was private investment. There were minimal requirements. And if that was successful, there was a potential NASA purchase. We knew we had a need. I mean, that was always clear. And the companies had to bet that they would be, and their investors had to bet that they would be successful in the development and demonstration, and then successful in the procurement for the service phase. But it was quantifiable in terms of an investor's viewpoint. You know, what's the probability that this company is going to make it through the demonstration phase? Probability that they're going to win the follow-on procurement? Probability that the space station is not going to fall out of the sky? And they could, you know, decide whether to invest. And in fact, you know, SpaceX was able to attract investors. Orbital, a public company, you know, they invested some of their own funds. But again, with a good, clear knowledge that there is going to be a return on that investment. So that's a new way of doing business for NASA. And the question is, can we use the model again? And I think this is a key question. Mr. Radzanowski mentioned this morning in his keynote speech. The question is, where are the potential sweet spots? Now, it's easy to understand our mission need. It's not as easy to understand what I call the potential non-NASA market. Congress, in its great wisdom, asked NASA to do a commercial market assessment as sort of a context for the commercial crew program, and you know, we did the best we could. You know, proud to deliver the report. Frankly, as we were deliberating that, I asked the question, you know, imagine we were the Congress and we were deciding whether to pass the Kelly Airmail Act of, was it 1925 or something, right? And as part of the question back to the federal agency, if it was the post office or Navy, whoever, you know, could you tell us 10 years from now how many million passenger miles might be stimulated as a result of passing this act? You know, and it's unknowable. I mean, the concept of a passenger mile probably didn't even exist. And so often we have to look for these sweet spots, knowing that the market, the non-NASA market that we would use to justify a non-traditional method of acquisition is frankly unknowable. And so let me test this thought process, because it's a difficult one. Let's say NASA was interested in procuring data about gravity waves. Who believes that there's a potential commercial market and we should use a partnership method? Anybody? Okay, all right. Let's say NASA wants to transport payloads to the surface of Mars. Who believes there may eventually be a commercial market for that, and perhaps we should consider? Okay, so yeah, you get the feeling of that, but try to prove that with data. It's impossible. And so this is one of the challenges we have to deal with at NASA. How do we, you know, other than using our gut feel, how do we know when it's safe to use a partnership method versus a more traditional method? And then how do we, if there is that gut feel, how do we consider it? Because it's not still, that doesn't mean a partnership is always the right answer. Sometimes, you know, our needs are such that it's better that we control it ourselves, risk or whatever, but so we're dealing also with then how do you do the trade between a partnership and a more traditional method. And so these are questions, and we encourage input on this. And lastly, the notion that there will be non-NASA customers. Then is there a NASA role to stimulate those non-NASA customers, or we just kind of have to be laissez-faire and, you know, let them happen or not happen? Well, you know, one might argue that it's in NASA's interest that there be other markets, you know, increased flight rate, increased economies of scale, increased reliability. So when we do purchase services, we're sharing the cost of the infrastructure. This seems to be either direct or certainly an indirect benefit to NASA. But should we, though, help stimulate these other markets? And this is a question. So, you know, potential applications of space, for example, that benefit society but don't benefit NASA. Because of these direct and indirect benefits, should NASA go out and help stimulate those uses of space and build non-NASA demand? These are questions. I have no answers, but I think the panel today and as we go through the conference next few days, it would be great to get your views on that. Thanks.
Great, thanks. It is a very interesting question, one that people talked about in the last panel quite a bit, how this public-private partnership works. We'll get back to that. Next, how about Mark Sirangelo from Sierra?
Good morning. Oh, come on. It's not that bad. We're talking about space, right? Yeah, come on. A little bit more noise. I've been coming to this conference for a number of years, and it's one of my favorite ones to come to because I do think that... Oh, I have to advance things too, huh? I do think it's really nice to be able to talk more about the future, and you're going to get to hear a lot of my remarks, hopefully at lunch if you come, so I'm going to keep this rather short, but uh-oh, it's a sign. We're about to launch. It's a lot of fun, and I want to first start by thanking the whole organizing team behind this conference. It's really, I think, a terrific conference, and it's continuing to grow and expand and get better in its content. And having seen it over the years of its formation, it's much like watching an entrepreneurial company grow up, and it really is. It's a pleasure to work with the team here, and we're very proud and happy to be part of it. And Alex is quite modest. He's taken over as the executive director of the Commercial Spaceflight Federation, which I've been involved with for a number of years, and has done a really terrific job coming from that organization known as Congress to coming into our world, and has really been very helpful in helping to guide us through a very challenging period of time in commercial space. Really, what I want to just touch on briefly, a little bit about our business. We are continuing to grow as a company. It's been a lot of fun. We're a little over 2,200 people now, and throughout the United States, and having about 410 space missions so far, something like that. And what's really good for us, we're a hardware company. We like building stuff. So we go to space now about every 3 weeks or so. Something we're building is going off to space. And we have 4 operating groups in what we do. And I want to focus on this just for a second because I think the nature of our business as it's changing, there is an awful lot of partnerships that go on even amongst companies that sometimes compete. I like to think of them as competimates. And in our 4 areas, we are one of the largest builders of small satellites in the world, and we are pioneering the next, what I think of, 3rd generation small satellites, which are going to be starting to launch. And our first part of that generation is going to be launching later this year on the SpaceX Falcon 9 that is going to go up to on the COTS program. So it's an interesting combination when you look at that. We are a significant builder of electrical, mechanical systems, and amongst many of the interesting things that go on in our world, normally August has been a pretty quiet time for this industry, but there's something called the CCI cap announcement that's coming up here soon. But beyond that, from our group, we're quite excited. Next Sunday, we get to land on Mars, and that's a really big deal, and I'll talk a little bit more about that on lunch, but we're a significant part of that program. Our rocket motor program is also going quite well. We fortunately have a number of different programs, including being the motor provider for the Virgin Galactic system, and that has moved forward quite well, and you probably saw the announcements from Virgin about where that's going, and we're part of that team. And lastly, we are the owners and developers of the Dream Chaser, which had its first flight this year, and that's been a terrific and really fun program for us to be involved in. This is what it looks like, as many of you have seen. And I want to just take a moment and talk about the mission. The mission here is quite simple for us. It is that we think it is LEO. It always has been for us. We're not looking to go beyond LEO. And from the very first time when we started this, we were looking at saying that the goal here is to make sure that as much of the space business as possible stays in the US. And we have a lot of our money right now leaving the country, and we see our goals as repatriating that and continuing to support the growth and the development of the ISS. It's been a long road, and we've been doing this for now and going to our 9th year, but under the NASA programs, we just finished our, can't really see it, but 18th milestone that has been completed, and that is the program's on schedule and on budget, which is really amazing in this kind of program, but we're very proud of that. Most recently, in the last couple of months, we finished a full system PDR, which is not just the vehicle, but the rocket, the integration, the entire system, and that was a NASA-level, very thorough PDR. We also conducted our first flight, our first captive carry flight of the vehicle, which flew around Colorado, and the vehicle's now on its way to Mojave, where working with NASA and the Dryden Flight Center, we'll be doing the first drop test. And much because we think history is a really good thing to look at, we'll be doing the test almost identical to what the Enterprise did on its first test. It's called the ALT, or Approach and Landing Test. That'll be done up in Edwards later this year. That's what it looked like, and one of the fun things about being able to run a company is you get to pick your pictures. And we live and work primarily, my office, corporate office is in Louisville, Colorado, in Boulder County. So we decided one day that what we wanted to do was conduct the first flight so that everyone in our office could go out and see it. We didn't realize that half of Denver was going to come out and see it at the same time, and the roads got stopped, and people got really excited. And it's really funny how the internet traffic works, because we started realizing that people were starting to tweet and do a lot of other things about the invasion coming from outer space of the UFO that was seen flying over Denver one morning. But it was a really fun experience, and we got to, this particular picture is particularly fun for me because it's actually, you can't see it, but in the background is in Boulder, and there's a vehicle just actually flown over what is known as Scott Carpenter Park in Boulder. And Scott Carpenter Park is full of things for children, as you can imagine. It's a playground, and the whole park full of space-related playground activity. So we felt there was a little bit of synergy to the past in doing that. So I'm going to just end on a short video, and keeping in somewhat of a tradition, I've thought this is the first time this video has been seen in public, and a couple of the last times I spoke here, I did the same thing, because I think this is a really neat place to debut things. The most fun part of that video was this was the first time we actually got to show real hardware flying. And for those of us who are building stuff, you don't, I think you realize what that means. But for those of you who are thinking about it, it's really the highlight of one's life when you see something coming from your head and all of a sudden it's on there for the first time in real life. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. It is inspiring to see the hardware, and I did forget to mention, of course, that Mark used to be the president of the Commercial Spaceflight Federation, one of many nonprofits that he's lent his time and energy to. We're very thankful. Let's see. I think next we're going to do Adam Harris from SpaceX.
Let's see. I'm going to get close to that video, so if you just bring that up first. So, thank you for having me at this conference. Let me start with talking a little bit about the question that Dennis raised, which is, was the COTS model a great model? And obviously at SpaceX, we believe that's a great model going forward. There are definitely things that government does very well, and SpaceX could not have done this last mission without the help and partnership of NASA. Everyone from the development effort of the Dragon capsule and many, many years of rocket technology that we got to take advantage of, 40 years of rocket technology that we got to take advantage of in building the Falcon 9 rocket, to the work down at Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral for the launch, and then the handover to Houston and Johnson Space Center while we on orbit. And I'm going to show you a quick video of that mission, and I'll talk a little bit through it as we go here, but definitely that NASA partnership for us on the COTS model and for the commercial crew model, which is, as Mark said, coming up here soon. So we're all anxiously awaiting for awards here on the next round of commercial crew. But SpaceX has been part of the commercial crew development program for the last year, and we think that really has worked out well for both NASA and private industry. So let me start with a highlights video from our last launch.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Stage 1. We have liftoff of the Falcon 9. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Starting pitch kick. Reactor power systems are normal.
Set confirmed.
Dragon solar rated limit. Solar has deployed.
That's what Dragon actually sees when it's looking at the space station.
They're initiating the capture of the Dragon. Standing by. Capture is confirmed.
Houston Station, looks like we got us a Dragon by the tail.
I spent quite a bit of time poking around in here this morning, just looking at the engineering and the layout, and I'm very pleased. So flying up in a human-rated Dragon is not going to be an issue.
About 3-foot seas out in the ocean, so that was quite a ride. So thanks. Yeah, so it's been a great summer for at SpaceX, and I think for NASA and for the space program. When Elon started the company in 2002, one of the key fundamental problems that he identified was the cost of access to space. We put ourselves in sort of this vicious cycle where the cost of launch was going up. So folks who built spacecraft and other things going to orbit tried to cram more and more onto those spacecraft. So the cost of those payloads went up. And when the cost of those payloads went up, we added things called mission assurance and additional layers of discussion about what should go on rockets and redundancy and a lot of different things, which were really fundamentally very good engineering practices, but it has caused a cost spiral in which our programs are too expensive and it's hard to get to orbit. So the problem that Elon identified was we need to bring these costs down. And if you look on our website, the SpaceX website shows the prices of a Falcon 9 rocket for about $55 million. Those are our expendable prices. And what Elon will say is that price is too high. Even at the $55 million a launch, that is too expensive. And to fundamentally change that equation, we think that reusability is the way to go. Of a rocket that is a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, if you think of that rocket at the $50 to $60 million price point, the fuel on that rocket is on the order of about $200,000. So the more of that rocket you can bring back and reuse, of course you're going to have cost of refurbishment, you're going to have those sort of things that have to go on each flight. But if you can get that price point away from the $50 million mark and bring it down even further, we think we can enable missions to orbit that fundamentally change this equation that says launch costs so much, so every flight is more valuable than gold, essentially. And so you have to get more and more onto that flight. We think we can enable better access and enable more opportunities to get to orbit. And that's really the mission we have at SpaceX. So that sort of describes our launch vehicle business. We are also in the Dragon spacecraft business. As you saw, a key part of this last mission was docking the Dragon with the International Space Station. A wonderful partnership with NASA on the COTS program, and that was our final flight of the COTS program. We're looking forward to delivering cargo for NASA over the next years. We're on contract for 12 of those flights to deliver cargo to the International Space Station. And I think as Elon looks at the landscape today, it's 10 years later from SpaceX. The fundamental problem right now in our space program is that the U.S. is 100% dependent on the Russian Soyuz for getting astronauts to orbit. And so we're looking forward to tackling that next challenge. The Dragon spacecraft was built from the beginning with the thought that it would carry astronauts someday. We at SpaceX are really looking to serve the NASA customer here in the future. We've been under the past year on the Commercial Crew Development Program working to develop an escape engine. We call that engine Draco. If you go to our website, you'll see the test firings of that Draco engine. We completed that beginning of this year. So it's not all been based on this past launch because we've been continuing to work the human spaceflight program at SpaceX. That escape system will get integrated into the Dragon spacecraft. We hope with NASA awards here soon we can continue that partnership and work to integrate that escape system. We have demonstrated to NASA the layout of the interior of the Dragon spacecraft and how we would accommodate 7 astronauts. We think we can fundamentally lower the cost of access to the space station from where the prices of the current Soyuz flights are at. Hopefully you'll see more about that soon in coming announcements. The other things going on at SpaceX, we just completed an engine upgrade. When I came to SpaceX, I sort of walked around and I tried to figure out what was the key fundamental technology going on in this company. And really, to me, what I would say is the propulsion technology. Our propulsion team has been working for the last 10 years and really using 40 years of NASA technology to improve upon that to create the Merlin rocket engine. We started out with 3 flights of the Falcon 1, which is a single Merlin rocket engine. Those first 3 flights did not make it to orbit. And quite frankly, the 2008 time period was probably the low point for SpaceX. That third failure was right in the midst of economic recession in this country. It was a really, call it for better word, a gut check time for what the company was going to do in the future. Luckily, we had hardware ready to go, and the 4th flight happened days later, less than 2 months later than that 3rd flight, and we reached orbit with the Falcon 1. And that Falcon 1 led to the Falcon 9 program, and we just completed what we call Merlin 1D, which is an engine upgrade for the Falcon rocket line. And that engine upgrade really is focused on reliability. We want to make sure that our engines are the most reliable in the world, quite frankly, and we want to have them have the ability to be reused in the future. So that's a fundamental goal of that concept. The Merlin 1D does have some increased thrust and performance, so that will help out on our Falcon 9. But another video that's on our website, if you go there, you can see the firing, full thrust firing of that Merlin 1D, and so we'll begin integrating that into the Falcon line, and I think that's one of those fundamental technologies. Do you have the next video queued up? I think this is the first time this video has been used at a conference, and so I want to show you what we're thinking about for the Commercial Crew Program. I apologize, this one doesn't have all the jazzy music that the last one. One of the things that the Super Dracos on the Dragon capsule gives us the ability to do is, in addition to a abort capability all the way to orbit, it allows us to start thinking about using that propulsion system to guide the Dragon back to land. This last mission you saw, we used 3 parachutes on Dragon to land in the ocean. We fundamentally think the propulsion landing, both in the ocean and eventually in the future landing to a designated spot on the Earth, is the way to go. It also allows us to think about landing that spacecraft on other planets, but those are future plans. And somebody asked whether there's a market of landing on Mars, and I would say we hope so. Fundamentally, we think that this business is about exploration, and humanity's movement to other planets is really what we want to do and enable at SpaceX. Yeah, so I think that first question, oh, thanks. That first question that Dennis raised, I think fundamentally this does need to be a partnership with NASA, and SpaceX has certainly enjoyed the benefits of working with NASA, and very much thank them for the COTS program and for the Commercial Crew program, and look forward to your questions here. So, thanks.
Great, thanks, Adam. Next, let's go to Jeff with ULA.
There we go. Jeff Patton, I'm from United Launch Alliance. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Alex, thanks for running the panel. Hopefully I can go through some of these charts fairly quickly, give you a feel for what ULA is, where we currently are, what we've done, where we're going in the future for Commercial Crew. And try to keep us on schedule. I got a really cool video. We're going to test out the base in the room and see how that goes. So I guess I need to do this, huh? Oh. Maybe not. Oh, left and right.
It's not your fault.
All right, not my fault. That's all right, I'll take the blame. All right, ongoing launch operations. Obviously, we've been launching rockets for quite some time. I just took a snapshot on the plane on the way here and kind of put little rockets on a ruler here, kind of show all the different configurations we've been flying for the past 10 years or so. It's a fairly aggressive launch schedule, launch manifest that we've had, but it's not the way the system was designed. Atlas V and Delta IV, when they were originally envisioned on the ELV program, were designed to launch up to 40 a year. We were going to blacken the skies with spacecraft. So our infrastructure, everything we have in place was to meet that rate. Unfortunately, the demand has not been high enough to do that. It hasn't been until recently, when I'll get into that in a couple of slides, that we really have started to see the launch rate hit what was originally envisioned for the ELV program. But we're very proud of this record. Dating back to 2002, you can see our record of continuous success down there on the Atlas family. We launched 106 vehicles without a failure, 106. Atlas V, we've had 31 successes in a row. Delta II, 97. That's been the workhorse for NASA and the Air Force. Delta IV, we're at 20. So you know, it's kind of tough. We don't really keep track of them in a cumulative sense anymore. We're all focused on the next one, make sure it's successful. So we kind of have to go back and scratch our heads and say, geez, how many have we had in a row? Because we really don't look at things like that. But you know, this is the heritage, this is the background that has really had some of our folks really be attracted to launching on our vehicles for Commercial Crew. This foundation of mission success that we've had for this many years has been really the basis for why people are coming to us for Commercial Crew. So just ULA, here's kind of our family portrait of just the ones we've launched in the past 5.5 years. That's 62 missions in a row. Pretty soon these icons, or these pictures are going to be pretty small. They're going to be unrecognizable. But again, we're very proud of that. It's a mix of vehicles in there: Delta IIs, Delta IVs, and Atlas Vs. Heavies, all sorts of different configurations are in there. So different coasts. So there's a long heritage in there. What I did want to kind of go through, and I have my crib sheet here, was that there's some notable accomplishments in there. When you just see the family picture, you just get a sense, geez, that's a lot of rockets. Yeah, I guess you guys have been launching a lot of things. But there's some critical things in here we've been launching. For example, between September 2010 and April of 2011, we launched 5 NRO missions. It was 4 different launch vehicle configurations, which included 3 Delta IV missions, including back-to-back heavy launches from each coast. We also had 3 different launch pads at 2 different launch sites to launch those 5 different NRO missions. Between June 2011 and November 2011, there were 5 NASA missions. Again, 5 different launch vehicle configurations, 3 different launch pads, and 2 launch sites. And then lastly, between March 2010 and August 2012, we had another 4 NRO missions. Again, 4 different launch vehicle configurations. That also included the first Delta IV medium plus 5.2 configuration that we've ever flown. We had 4 different launch pads, 2 different launch sites, and the big thing was 2 launches within 9 days. So that's a huge accomplishment to have our launch team and our entire infrastructure to be able to respond to that kind of launch rate. So with that, I'd like to kind of show the highlight of the year to date. This is just the missions we've flown this past year. Do I need to do something with this?
Video?
Yes, please.
RLC, report range, go for launch.
Ranges go.
LC, go for launch. Roger, go for launch.
This is Delta Mission Control at T-minus 5. Main engine ignition. And liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Delta IV rocket carrying WGS-4 for the United States Air Force.
Status check. Go Alice. Go Centaur.
We have ignition, and we have a liftoff. Liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket carrying the first Mobile User Objective System mission for the United States Navy. MUOS will significantly enhance communications for U.S. forces on the move.
This is Delta Mission Control at T-minus 5. Delta engine ignition, 1, 0, and liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Delta IV rocket carrying the NRO L-25 mission for the National Reconnaissance Office. Five, 4, 3. Atlas engine ignition, 0, and liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket carrying AEHF-2 for the United States Air Force.
Status check. Go Atlas. Go Centaur.
And the RD-180 engine roars to life. And liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket carrying the NRO L-38 payload for the National Reconnaissance Office.
RLC, report range, go for launch.
Ranges go.
LC, go for launch. Roger, go for launch.
Minus 30.
Green board.
And the RS-68A engines roar to life and liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Delta IV Heavy carrying the NRO L-15 mission for the National Reconnaissance Office.
Been a little busy the first 6 months of this year. Right now we're in the middle of launching 11 missions this year, halfway through. In order to support this, in a 1 week period, we had significant operations for 4 key missions. On July 13th at the Cape, we erected the Atlas V booster for the NASA Radiation Belt Storm Probe mission. 3 days later, we mated the Centaur upper stage for that mission. July 16th and 17th, we loaded both an Atlas V and a Delta IV core into the Delta Mariner for its trip, or for their trip down to the Cape for launch. And then on July 17th, we encapsulated the NROL-36 spacecraft at Vandenberg on the Atlas V booster for launch on August 2nd. So again, we had a very, very busy time here this year, and hopefully we'll continue that pace. I want to talk a little bit about human launch services. I've showed you where we've been doing here recently and over the past 10 years. What are we doing going forward? Hopefully many of you saw that we announced the formation of a human launch services organization. That's been kind of a long time coming. You know, people kind of think that we're dinosaurs. Some of us in the company are mammals. We're trying to become furry mammals. And it's kind of come to fruition after working on this for a long time. Mark, I think you were one of the first ones to come to us and say, hey, what about launching Dream Chaser? So it's been a long time in this coming to get us focused on some of the advanced things that we're working on and really kind of separate our focus from the recurring missions for the Air Force, NASA, and NRO, kind of focus on some advanced programs and really provide the unique focus that those programs need. That was announced about a month or 6 weeks ago. My boss, George Sowers, is the head of that. My new job is actually, I'm not the BD guy anymore. Most of you probably know me as the BD guy, but now I've got to really do real work, so I'm a systems engineering person to pull all these different programs together. So I got to do real work now. I'm not sure what that means, but underneath the Human Launch Services, we have EFT-1. That's a launch service for Lockheed Martin for the first Orion test vehicle. We're launching that in 2014. We're also doing integration of the Delta IV upper stage into SLS. We use that as the upper stage for that vehicle for the first couple of missions. And then Commercial Crew, which again is very near and dear to my heart, supporting a number of different companies who want to launch on Atlas for that capability. I will say, you know, we can launch all sorts of things. We've demonstrated, or we've proven we can launch capsules, biconics, winged vehicles, not a problem. Incidentally, I just hired a guy the other day from the Titan program that actually did the study mark for flying HL-20 on Titan. So, you know, we have a long history of looking at flying all these different vehicles, and we should be able to do that successfully. It shouldn't be a problem. So, Commercial Crew, like I said, we've been selected by 3 out of the 4 currently funded partners on CCDev to be their launch vehicle. We have, under the current CCDev 2 unfunded Space Act agreements, we are one of those contributing to that capability with our own internal funds. We've gone through a number of different reviews. We just completed the SRR SDR, which essentially established a baseline for how we're going to comply with all the requirements. Many of us have been saying for a long time that it's not a problem for us to meet the NASA requirements, and we've gone through the process with NASA at our side to demonstrate to them that we meet those requirements, and in almost all cases exceed their requirements. So we're very pleased with that. We have one last one under the unfunded, which is a safety review here in a couple of weeks. And safety is probably the biggest thing from a crew launch standpoint that we're trying to work with NASA to understand what the requirements are and how our flight-proven system can meet those requirements. We have been doing the emergency detection system design, which is really the one fundamental thing, enhancement to the rocket we got to make, which is essentially a box with a series of sensors. It's going to tell you when you're going to have a bad day. We've been working on that for 5 or 6 years now, under company money and under NASA money to enhance that design. We understand all the different faults we're going to have, what could make the vehicle have a bad day, based again on all that experience you saw earlier. We really understand how the vehicle works and what we got to monitor to see if we're going to have a problem. And then we've also baselined how the heck we're going to get people in and out down to the Cape. If you've ever seen our launch pad down there, I guess you saw it in some of the video, there's really no way to get people in and out at the pad. So we got to build something down there to get people in and out, which I'll kind of show you in a couple of charts. This is kind of the geeky systems engineering chart where NASA has a series of 1100 series set of documents that include all their technical requirements to comply with to launch people. And we've gone through and pulled out the ones that apply to the launch vehicle system and said, geez, you know, we went through and headed towards an SRR with NASA to say, how do we comply with that? Basically what this says is the majority of them, all but 9 out of the 117 that we looked at that are just launch vehicle centric, we meet the NASA requirements without a problem. Includes 1.4 factor safety. We got tons of margin on that. About the only ones that are still open are some that we're working with NASA to try to figure out exactly what they mean, launch availability, things like that. They're kind of integrated with the specific launch vehicle or the specific spacecraft that we're flying. So since we're flying several different versions, the integrated analysis is a little different. So from that standpoint, we don't believe we have a problem. Never have. So here's kind of showing capsules and winged vehicles and how we get them out of the pad. Again, if you're familiar with the Cape, we have a clean pad. There's really nothing out there. We do all our processing in the vertical integration facility. And so we got to build a new structure. Made a whole lot of sense for us to go out and build something more traditional. We call it a crew access tower. It's steel girder construction with a swing arm on it, can get people in and out to all the different spacecraft configurations we have, and really meets all of NASA's requirements for emergency egress, all that kind of good stuff that NASA's kind of used to seeing. So those are a couple of the big things we've been working on for Commercial Crew. And I kind of surprised Alex here at the end because I put in a chart here maybe to kind of transition us over to some talking points or some discussion. There's a lot of talk about commercial space. What the heck is commercial space? It means different things to different people. We kind of broke it down into 3 different categories. You know, what's the source of the capital investment? Is it capital investment coming from company profit? Is it coming from the government? Are there other sources that it's coming from? Is this what it means to be commercial? What's the customer base? Is it just the U.S. government? If you're just a U.S. government contractor, are you commercial? Do you have the capability to do commercial? Is there a commercial market out there? Is there an established market? Is there something you're going after? For example, Bigelow Aerospace, we've been working with Bob for 7-8 years now to try to help facilitate his market. The tremendous upside potential, especially for launch vehicles, to get the rate up. Are we going to go out and base all our business cases on that? Well, we should talk about that. What about the contract type? Is it a FAR-based contract with all the overhead that Alex brought up, or that Adam brought up? There's a lot of overhead associated with FAR contracts that cost a lot of money. NASA's doing Space Act agreements. That's a good way of doing things. We developed the entire ELV system on the Air Force equivalent of a Space Act, which is an OTA. Great process to go through. But how do you go off and certify that? And what's the cost for doing that? So these are kind of all things that kind of come into the equation for defining what commercial is and who the customer is. So with that, I will get off the stage.
Thanks, Thanks, Jeff. That's right. Back in November, I guess, you launched a vehicle that was very near and dear to my heart, the Mars Science Lab, which, as Mark said, has some of their components on as well. And here's hoping in 9 days, I guess, 10 days, something like that, it'll do well. Yeah, so I think there are some very interesting questions about what is commercial, what is the relationship between industry and government. And, you know, maybe we should start out by talking about, you know, where it has been so far. That is, what has industry learned from working with NASA, and what has NASA learned from industry by working with industry? Whoever wants to jump in on that.
I'll say that one of the biggest benefits of SpaceX of working with NASA has really been in the technology arena. Both our engine design is based on some of the early Apollo work. Our heat shield is based on a NASA design, and so a lot of that R&D that NASA does has really helped us and really helped SpaceX get to where it is today. And I think certainly there are places where government does very well doing those things, and where industry can do their thing, and it's a good partnership.
Well, we certainly have learned a lot from industry and through this process. You know, the success of SpaceX and the fine work that Orbital has done has shown us that you know, the cost model can work, that we can tap into the innovation of industry, and it's not you know, the commercial industry versus the rest of industry. It's one industry, right? It's simply a different method of engaging them. So we see companies large and small, you know, old and new, working on this. And so what we've learned is that a choice of method of engagement can certainly lead to untapping some creativity, and SpaceX has certainly shown that, as you said, the engine and the other technologies. Orbital's done some great work as well, and we've seen great work in the Commercial Crew program. So we've learned a lot, because sometimes, frankly, at NASA, we're not sure if this is friend or foe. And I think through COTS and the great success that we've had so far has made a lot of us feel more at ease. You've been hearing that today, a lot more open-minded about engaging in the same industry, but in a different way.
I think from our side, we looked at it a little bit differently. I'll use an analogy that is around us this week, and that is the Olympic Circle Ring. We developed a design and a structure that actually incorporates NASA with us. And I think that's been a really enlightening process for us and for NASA. We have now 8 NASA centers who are engaged on our program, which means that we're tapping into some amazing talent, skills, resources, facility, and being able to access that history in a way that isn't 2 different organizations looking at each other, but they actually overlap. And they overlap physically. We have now dozens of former NASA leaders who work with us who are bringing that understanding of how to interact with NASA along with them. On the flip side, I think when they get here and they start working on our world, they realize how fast we can move, and there's a lot of knowledge that there is ways to safely and correctly move programs forward that is filtering back, we hope, in some ways, back into NASA for the next projects they're working on. So I don't really look at it as being 2 different organizations that are looking at each other over a fence. I see us that we're really integrated, and much like the Olympic Circle Rings have an overlap between them. I think that's the way that we're trying to work it, and it's been a terrific history for us. We're better than we would have been without NASA, and I hope in some ways that we're showing NASA that there is a very efficient and effective way to look at new project development like this.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to add that it's been very helpful. The partnership we've had with NASA through our funded Space Act Agreement and our unfunded Space Act Agreement has been very good because it's helped us and helped NASA get familiar with the vehicle. The human spaceflight side of NASA has not been involved in our design for Atlas V or Delta IV, so getting them engaged and understanding how we made the decisions we did on how we designed the vehicle and how robust that design truly is, the real benefit that we've had is them seeing that and understanding that, hey, you know, we really can meet the requirements. It's not a problem to go out and do, and they have a lot of confidence and help build that confidence in the human spaceflight community to use the Atlas or the Delta.
Great, thank you. It is an interesting relationship, and people often forget that the same people are involved that worked at NASA, that now work in industry, that worked in industry, that now work at NASA, and that it's a bunch of scientists and engineers building some great projects. I'd like to go out to the audience and see if anybody has any questions for these gentlemen while we're here. Here on the end here. In green. Oh. Up here in green, yeah.
So I have 2 questions, one for SpaceX and one for the ULA. Actually, for both SpaceX and Sierra Nevada. So we're talking about risk and reliability, and I think we can pretty much nail down the risks during the launch phase. Now, we're talking about orbital return, and one of the remaining higher risks is the reentry phase. How are you tackling that? Is the Draco, for example, an option for providing an abort during reentry? I mean, I know it's quite strange to talk about something like this, but what are you thinking about alternate scenarios, and is Draco an option of that, or is Sierra Nevada equipped to provide an abort scenario during reentry? I mean, you cannot always rely on your heat shield design. The other question, which is really outside of my area of expertise, but just popped in my head, and I don't belong to the Green Party, but what is the ecological impact of these launches? And where are you going with this launch systems? Are you going in bigger and larger, or do you have R&D developments on making them actually smaller, the launch systems, but more powerful and, yeah, again, reusable, perhaps? Thank you.
So let me take the first one on abort scenarios for Dragon in particular. Yes, our system for Dracos are made so that if one of those engines went out, if we had a failure of an engine, then we could still control the vehicle. That was an important demonstration during COTS, as a matter of fact. With the current Draco engines on Dragon, there has to be the ability that any one failure doesn't stop the mission. And so as you watch that mission occur, there were about 2 days between launch and docking with the International Space Station. And the purpose of that was we kind of euphemistically called it the doing backflips in orbit. But what we were doing was we were testing out all these different abort scenarios. And we were away from the space station, but we were moving close, backing off, showing that we could work in all those different scenarios. You asked a question about aborting during reentry. It implied without a heat shield. I don't know if that's possible. That sounds like a really, really bad day. But I think what the idea is to design so you don't have that contingency, and make sure your heat shield is robust enough to be able to withstand on-orbit anomalies. Your second question was, I'm sorry, I just lost it in my head, was the ecological impact of the launch vehicles. Only a funny sort of thing is that I think it was Stephen Colbert asked Elon if he has Tesla, which is the electric car company, which is trying to reduce the carbon footprint, and he has SpaceX, which seems to do exactly the opposite to the atmosphere. But the reality is launch vehicles do not harm the atmosphere that much. They're a 9-minute ride to orbit. Mostly the products they're putting out are water and other chemicals, but those dissipate fairly quickly. So certainly the most ecological impact in this business is dealing with hazardous commodities. And so the more we can do to reduce the use of those hazardous commodities, that will help sort of these issues.
Well, I'll answer a little bit quickly on that. We have a different design in us being a lifting body, and there's a number of really significant values to that. One is that we can land on any runway, really, any commercial runway. So we have a world full of alternative runway landing places. We also have a significant cross range of about 1,500 kilometers, so we can point at San Jose and land 1,500 miles away from here if we needed to. So there's a lot of built-in capacity in doing that. On the vehicle side, interesting, we actually have a green vehicle, and it's a small step, but it is a step in that there isn't any hazardous materials on board our Dream Chaser. The motors are actually recycled rubber that we use for on board, and one of the really interesting benefits of that is that you can actually go right up to the vehicle when it stops, once the heat dissipates. Unlike the shuttle where there's a lot of hazardous materials on board and you had to quarantine it, we don't have that issue, so that people can go right up and take astronauts who've been on station off quickly or experiments off quickly, and that whole system is designed to be without any poisonous materials or without putting anything hazardous in the environment, at least from the vehicle side.
Great. Let me ask a quick question, then we'll go out to the audience again. One of the things about this conference, of course, is in Silicon Valley, there's a lot of people here who are interested in forming new companies and in bringing new ideas to market. Obviously, everybody here provides a service, except for Dennis there. What are some of the maybe I said that the wrong way. Provides a launch or an orbit service. What are some of the ideas that you think are going to be important in the future, whether from a NASA market point of view or from a commercial market point of view for your vehicle? You can start back down at the end.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
What are some of the upcoming ideas that you think will be an important market for your vehicle, whether from NASA or from the commercial industry?
Well, I mentioned during my presentation, we've been working with Bigelow Aerospace for a number of years on trying to help facilitate his desire to get a commercial capability on orbit. We think that that's something that can really help the launch industry, can really help the entire space industry by having that access, having a place to go, having a place that has a turnaround, a routine to get to on a very regular basis, having as low a cost as possible. So we shared Bob's vision to try to help that happen. We've always referred to that as a three-legged stool, in that he would have the destination and we would have the Earth to LEO transportation. The only thing that he's missing is the capsule. So that's why it's so crucial now for us as a nation and as an aerospace industry to help get that third leg of the stool, to get that spacecraft designed so that we can actually see these kind of other markets come to fruition.
I think for us it's three things beyond the obvious of taking crew to the station. The station is a laboratory, not an observatory, and the more that you could go there and bring things home, the more science that will be done, and there's some very critical science that's going on right there currently and hopefully continuing. The ability to bring things home from that science world, I think, is going to become increasingly more and more important. The other two things we see is having the ability to do servicing of satellites in LEO in an efficient manner. Not only does that help the satellite industry, but it also may help the debris industry by having those satellites taken care of properly. And the third thing for us is having a long-duration orbital test bed for science experiments, to be the ability to put things on a vehicle of our size, fly them for an extended period of time, unmanned, and return them so you can take them apart and see how they performed in space, we think is going to be very helpful in the future.
I want to pick up on something you just mentioned, Mark, and that is the science. There's a huge industry called biotechnology, and removing gravity is very useful. There's no convection, hydrodynamic forces, sedimentation, what have you. And when you remove gravity, this can be very valuable. The biotech industry is not being served really too well yet. The station is now open for business. We can begin serving them. We need to outreach to them. And I think if we can do that, we can really open some really big markets for not only the commercial cargo, but the commercial crew providers, as well as the space station, Bigelow, and beyond. So that, I think, is one of the exciting, very near-term potentials for us.
Yeah, I would say I think Dennis raises a really important point, which is as we continue to lower the cost of access to space, that we ought to start talking to new industries. We talk a lot to the space industry, but the biotech industry, the other industries here in Silicon Valley have opportunities here that we need to get out and talk to about the benefits of microgravity, the benefits of being on orbit, and for us, that creates a virtuous cycle. That creates more launches, it creates more activity in orbit, and that will help all of us out, I think.
Great, thanks. Let's take a question over here.
So, can you hear me? Yep. Okay. So for Adam, Jeff, and Mark, I've heard that an Alex.
Hold on, yeah.
Hi, my name is Paul Masson. For Adam, Jeff, and Mark, and maybe Alex, I understand you've articulated the value to you of the Space Act agreements, funded and unfunded. But I also understand, and Dennis, you don't have to respond to this one here, that, of course, NASA needs to move to an acquisition base. What additional analysis, information, or precedents would help you as an industry to explain the benefit, reduced overhead of Space Act, and the ability to configure programs and projects with greater flexibility?
Well, I think the first thing you need to understand is that under the Space Act agreement, I think the most significant value of that, people look towards the regulation side. I don't think that's really the case. At the end of the day, we are going to have to certify our vehicle to fly under NASA regulations, under FAA regulations, and it doesn't matter the contract type because the vehicle is going to be looked at, is it safe or isn't it safe? No different than I think an airplane is looked at, is it safe or isn't it safe? I think the primary value of the Space Act agreement has been the ability to foster a significant amount of investment, company investment, outside investment into the program. It is much more difficult to do that under FAR contracts for a variety of reasons, and you spend a lot of money managing the FAR contracts. So I think from our perspective, the nurturing of the industry, the development of the companies and the products over the last few years has been greatly enhanced by using this vehicle. I don't think it compromises safety or anything else at all. It just allowed for the industry to get on its feet and to attract the kind of investment that we have all put in some form or fashion. Because at the end of the day, we do own the intellectual property, and that is a significant reason why people invest in things.
Yeah, to echo what Mark said, I mean, certification under an SAA can be done. We're going to do that anyway to satisfy ourselves to make sure the system is safe. So the thought that because of the contracting mechanism you're not going to do things, you're going to take shortcuts is incorrect. The thing that we need to work together as an industry is to understand how we're going to do that under an SAA in conjunction with what each of the companies is going to do, and how NASA gets happy with that, regardless of the contracting mechanism. That we have to decide how we're going to do it, and again, nobody sitting up here is going to fly something that we don't feel comfortable flying.
I would just say in general about Space Act agreements, I think it allows the government, NASA, or the government agency who's doing the procurement to bring in non-traditional players. You know, there are certain companies who are really good at doing business under FAR contracts, and those companies tend to win. And so what Space Act agreements do is they bring in new ideas and new players to the government. So I think that benefits this industry and can continue to do benefit.
And let me say, as somebody who makes these arguments to members of Congress and the public and other folks, the greatest thing we have in favor of these things is success. When they work, and we can point to them and say, look, that was a successful program, and let's go do that again with a different program. I think it is now right around noon, and I know everybody wants to go to lunch and hear from Mark, who I think is going to be giving us a talk there. Thank you very much for listening. From the Commercial Spaceflight Federation's point of view, this is always a wonderful conference. It's the first time I've been, but I know we've had a presence here for many years. Happy to be here, and please come talk to me if you're curious about what it is we do in Washington.